The signal was weak and broken, barely more than static with a voice hidden inside. Grace leaned closer to the communication panel and listened. The words were not in any human language, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone was dying. Someone was asking for help. "Where is it coming from?" she asked. Daniel stood at the center of the bridge with his arms crossed. He was a tall man with gray in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. He had been a soldier once, but that was a long time ago. Now he commanded the Mercy's Hand, a medical relief vessel that went where others would not. "Prime," said Park from his station. He was younger than the others, with quick hands and a gentle voice. "The planet fell to the 3 months ago. The Galactic Council declared it restricted. No ships in or out." "The Council does not get to decide who deserves medical care," Grace said. Daniel looked at her. They had known each other for 7 years. He trusted her judgment more than his own. "The do not take kindly to interference. If we go there, we might not come back." "Then we do not come back." Grace met his eyes without flinching. "But we go." Maya Torres, the security chief, checked her weapon. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back tight and scars on her hands from fights she never talked about. "I am with the doctor. We signed up for this." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Set course for Prime. Keep us off the main channels. If they spot us before we reach atmosphere, we run. No arguments." The ship turned toward the distant star, and the crew prepared for whatever waited ahead. The journey took 2 days. Grace spent most of that time in the medical bay, checking supplies and running through scenarios in her head. They were a reptilian species, peaceful by nature, known for their farming and their poetry. They had no army. When they came with their warships and their soldiers, they had nothing to fight back with. Joined her on the second day. "I have been studying their biology," he said. "Their blood is copper-based instead of iron. Their bones are lighter than ours. They do not handle cold well." "What about their children?" "Smaller scales, more sensitive to dehydration. If there are survivors, the children will be in the worst shape." Grace nodded and kept working. She tried not to think about what they might find. She had seen enough ruined worlds to know that hope was a dangerous thing to carry into a disaster zone, but she carried it anyway. It was the only tool that never ran out. When the Mercy's Hand dropped out of faster-than-light travel, they showed them what they had done. Prime had been a green world once, covered in farms and forests and small villages built from stone. Now it was gray and brown. Entire regions had been burned black by orbital strikes. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were nothing but rubble and ash. "I am detecting life signs," said. His voice was tight. "Northern mountains, maybe 200, maybe more. The readings are unclear." "Patrols?" Daniel asked. 3 ships in orbit on the far side. They have not spotted us yet." "Take us down fast. Find somewhere to land near those life signs." The ship dove through the atmosphere with its shields absorbing the heat of re-entry. Maya watched the tactical display with sharp eyes, ready to call out any threat. But the sky was empty. They had already won their war. They did not expect anyone to be foolish enough to come here now. The Mercy's Hand set down on a rocky plateau near a mountain range. The air outside was thin and cold, tainted with the smell of smoke that had been drifting for months. Grace led the first team out, with beside her and 2 medics following behind. Maya stayed at the landing zone with a squad of security personnel, watching the perimeter. They found the cave entrance hidden behind a fall of boulders. Someone had piled the rocks there deliberately, trying to seal themselves away from the world outside. Grace climbed over the barrier and switched on her light. The tunnel went deep into the mountain. Water dripped from the ceiling and pooled on the floor. The walls were covered in scratches, marks left by claws scraping against stone. After 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Grace stopped. Her light swept across the space and she saw them. Dozens of them, maybe 100 or more. They huddled together in groups, wrapped in torn blankets and dirty cloth. Their scales were dull and cracked. Their eyes were empty. Some of them did not even look up when the light touched them. "We are here to help," Grace said softly. "We are doctors. We have food and medicine." No one answered. No one moved. They had heard promises before. Then a small shape separated from the shadows at the back of the cave. A child. She was thin, terribly thin, with scales that should have been bright green but had faded to a sickly yellow. She walked toward Grace on unsteady legs, and the adults around her did nothing to stop her. Perhaps they were too weak. Perhaps they had given up. The child stopped 2 meters away. She looked at the medical scanner in Grace's hand, at the supply pack on her back, at the symbol of the Red Cross on her shoulder. She had seen tools before. She had seen what they did with their tools. "Will your tools be kinder than their swords?" the child whispered. Grace felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart. Her heart was still beating, but something else, some wall she had built to protect herself from moments exactly like this one. She knelt down slowly, making herself small. She set the scanner on the ground. She pulled off her gloves and held up her empty hands so the child could see them. "Yes," Grace said. "I promise you, our tools are only for healing. We did not come here to hurt anyone. We came because we heard you calling for help." The child stared at her for a long time. Then she took one step forward and another until she was close enough to touch. Her small hand reached out and pressed against Grace's palm. "My name is Vila," the child said. "My name is Grace, and I am going to take care of you now." Behind Vila, an old male rose to his feet. His scales were, and his left arm hung at a bad angle, healed wrong after being broken. He looked at Grace with eyes that held no trust, only exhaustion. "You should not have come here," he said. "They will find you. They will kill you, and then they will kill us for accepting your help." "Then we had better work fast," Grace replied. She turned to and the medics. "Start triage, worst cases first, children and elderly priority, move." The work began. In the dim light of the cave, surrounded by people who had lost everything, the humans set about doing the only thing they knew how to do. They healed. They helped. They refused to let despair win. And high above them, a patrol ship adjusted its course, drawn by a sensor reading that should not have been there. The old's name was, and he watched the humans work with eyes that gave nothing away. He had been a teacher before the war, a keeper of history and poetry. Now he was the closest thing the survivors had to a leader, though he had never asked for that burden. Grace moved through the cave with steady hands and a calm voice. She cleaned wounds and applied medicine. She checked for infections and set broken bones, worked beside her, adapting human treatments to biology with a speed that surprised even himself. The two medics from the ship handled the supply distribution, making sure everyone received clean water and nutrition packs. Vila followed Grace everywhere. The child had attached herself to the human doctor in a way that seemed almost desperate. Whenever Grace moved to a new patient, Vila moved with her. Whenever Grace knelt to examine someone, Vila knelt beside her. "She has not spoken to anyone since her parents died," said. He had approached Grace without her noticing, silent despite his size. "The soldiers came to our village. Her father tried to protect her mother. They broke his arms and made him watch while they killed her. Then they killed him too." Vila saw everything. Grace closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, her face was steady. How did she survive? Her grandmother hid her in a storage cellar. The old woman did not survive the journey to these caves. Vila has been alone for 2 months. Grace looked down at the child. Vila looked back with eyes that were too old for her small face. "She is not alone anymore," Grace said. Made a sound that might have been a laugh in better times. "You speak as though you plan to stay. You cannot stay. They control this world. They will find your ship. They will find you. And when they do, they will make an example of all of us. Then help us evacuate your people." To where? The galaxy has turned its back on us. The Council declared this zone restricted. No one is coming to save the... We came. Stared at her. There was something in his eyes that Grace recognized. It was the look of someone who wanted to believe but had been hurt too many times. Why? He asked. We have nothing to offer you. We cannot pay you. We cannot fight for you. We are farmers and poets. We are nothing. Grace stood up and faced him directly. You are people. That is enough. The old had no answer for that. He turned and walked away into the shadows of the cave, leaving Grace alone with her work and her questions. The night cycle came, though underground there was no way to tell. The humans worked in shifts, catching a few hours of sleep when they could. Grace stayed awake longer than anyone, refusing to rest while patients still needed care. Vila developed a fever sometime after midnight. The wound on her arm, the one that had already been treated, had become infected despite the medicine. Grace sat beside the child and monitored her temperature, adjusting the treatment as needed. You should sleep, said. He brought her water and a protein bar. I can watch her. I promised her I would take care of her. You are no good to anyone if you collapse. Grace took the water but did not drink. When I was a girl, my mother was very sick. She spent months in the hospital. I used to sit beside her bed every night, even when the nurses told me to go home. I thought that if I left, something bad would happen. I thought my presence was the only thing keeping her alive. Did she survive? Yes, the doctors saved her, but I never forgot what it felt like to be that scared, that helpless. Vila has no one to sit beside her. She has no one to tell her it will be okay, so I will do it. Nodded slowly. He understood, even if he did not agree. He left Grace alone with the sleeping child and went to check on the other patients. The fever broke near dawn. Vila opened her eyes and found Grace still there, still watching over her. The child did not smile, but something in her expression softened. You stayed, Vila said. I told you I would. Adults lie. They say things to make children feel better. Then they die or go away, and the children are alone again. Grace reached out and took the child's small hand in her own. I am not going anywhere, not until you are safe. A sound came from the entrance of the cave. Footsteps, many of them. Maya's voice crackled through Grace's communicator. We have company, ground troops moving toward our position, 20 at least, probably more behind them. Grace stood quickly. How long do we have? Minutes, maybe less. They know we are here. The cave erupted into chaos. Who had been sleeping woke in terror. Children cried. Adults shouted questions that no one could answer. Grace grabbed her medical kit and moved toward the entrance, pulling Vila along with her. Daniel's voice came through the communicator next. I am bringing the ship in closer. We cannot land inside the cave, but I can provide cover fire and sensor support. Maya, hold the entrance as long as you can. Understood. Appeared beside Grace. His eyes were no longer empty. They burned with something that looked almost like hope. Tell me what to do, he said. Keep your people calm. Move them to the back of the cave. If we have to evacuate, you will lead them to the ship. And if the breakthrough... Grace looked at him steadily. They will not. She did not know if that was true. She did not know if anything she had promised was true. But she had learned long ago that sometimes belief was the only weapon that mattered. If she believed hard enough, maybe the universe would bend to match her conviction. Maya had set up defensive positions at the cave entrance. Portable barriers, automated turrets, motion sensors. It was not much, but it was something. The security chief handed Grace a sidearm. Do you know how to use this? I am a doctor. Today, you might have to be something else. Grace took the weapon. It felt heavy and wrong in her hand, but she did not give it back. The first soldiers appeared on the ridge above the cave. They were tall and broad, covered in dark armor that absorbed light. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that made them look like machines instead of living beings. One of them raised a communication device and spoke in a voice that echoed across the rocks. "Humans, you have violated restricted space. Surrender now and you will be granted a quick death. Resist, and we will make your end last for days." Maya did not bother to respond. She simply waited, weapon ready, eyes fixed on the enemy. They did not wait either. They opened fire. The battle for the cave had begun, and somewhere in the darkness behind her, Grace could hear Vila crying. The child was calling her name, asking where she had gone, begging her not to leave. Grace wanted to go back. Every part of her wanted to return to the child and hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But she could not. Not yet. First, she had to make sure there was a future worth surviving into. She raised the weapon she did not want to hold and prepared to fight for people she had only just met. They came down the slope like a dark wave. Their weapons flashed blue and white, sending bolts of energy that cracked against Maya's barriers and melted stone. The automated turrets returned fire, tracking targets with cold precision. 2 soldiers fell, then 3 more, but others kept coming. Maya shouted orders to her security team. They moved with practiced efficiency, covering each other, conserving ammunition, falling back one position at a time. They were outnumbered but they had something they did not expect. They had reason to hold their ground. Grace crouched behind a barrier and fired her weapon when targets presented themselves. She was not a good shot. Her hands shook and her aim was poor, but she refused to hide while others fought for the people in her care. "Medical team, fall back to the secondary position," Maya ordered. "Doctor, that means you." "I can still fight." "You can still heal. That is more important. Go." Grace hesitated for only a moment. Then she turned and ran deeper into the cave, following the glow sticks that had placed to mark the path. She found him at the secondary medical station, surrounded by who had been injured in the panic. 3 broken bones, 2 concussions, 1 cardiac event, reported. "The cardiac patient is stable for now, but he needs real surgery. We do not have the equipment here. We need to get them to the ship. The ship cannot land while they are attacking. Then we hold until they stop." An explosion rocked the cave. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, children screamed. Grace grabbed her kit and moved toward the sound. She found Vila pressed against the cave wall, arms wrapped around 2 younger children who were crying too hard to breathe. The small girl was not crying. Her face was blank, her eyes distant. She had retreated to somewhere inside herself where the fear could not reach. Grace knelt beside her and spoke softly. "Vila, Vila, look at me." The child did not respond. "I need you to be brave for a little while longer. Can you do that? Can you help me take care of these little ones?" Slowly, Vila's eyes focused. She looked at Grace, then at the crying children in her arms. Something shifted in her expression. A decision. A choice to be present instead of absent. "I can help," Vila said. "Good, keep them calm. Sing to them if you can. I will be back soon." Grace left the children with Vila and returned to the fighting. They had pushed closer. Maya was bleeding from a wound on her shoulder but refused to let anyone treat it. The barriers were failing. The turrets were running low on power. Then a new voice crackled through the communicator. "Daniel, from the ship above. I have visual on the enemy position. They are preparing heavy weapons. If they deploy them, the cave entrance will collapse." "Can you stop them?" Maya asked. "I can try." The Mercy's hand was not a warship. It had no missiles, no energy cannons, no armor plating. But it had engines, and engines produced exhaust, and exhaust at close range was as deadly as any weapon. Daniel brought the ship down in a screaming dive. The soldiers looked up too late. The engine wash hit them like a wall of fire, scattering their formation and melting their heavy weapon before it could be deployed. Daniel pulled the ship up and away, trailing smoke from damaged hull plates. That bought us time, he said. Not much, they are regrouping. Maya seized the moment. Push forward, take back the entrance. The security team charged. The still recovering from the ship's attack could not hold their ground. They retreated up the slope, leaving wounded behind. One of those wounded was not dead. A young soldier lay on the rocks with a hole in his chest plate. He was breathing in short, ragged gasps. His helmet had been knocked off, revealing a face that was almost human in its fear and pain. Maya raised her weapon to finish him. "Wait," Grace said. "He is the enemy. He is a patient." Maya stared at her. "You cannot be serious." "I am a doctor. I do not get to choose who deserves treatment. He would kill you without hesitation. That is his choice. This is mine." Grace knelt beside the wounded and opened her medical kit. The soldier flinched away from her, eyes wide with confusion. He had expected death. He had not expected this. "Hold still," Grace said. "I'm going to seal this wound. It will hurt, but you will live." This name was. He was young, barely past his species' age of maturity. He had been a soldier for less than a year. He had never killed anyone before today, though he had tried. "Why?" he asked as Grace worked on his wound. His voice was weak but clear. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you need help. I am your enemy. Right now, you are my patient. The rest we can figure out later." Had no response to that. He lay still and let the human doctor save his life, and his entire understanding of the universe began to crack apart. Maya pulled Grace aside when the treatment was done. "We cannot take him with us. We cannot leave him here either. What do you want to do?" "Tie him up, keep him under guard. When this is over, we release him. He will report our position to his commanders. They already know our position." Maya shook her head but did not argue further. She was learning that arguing with Grace was like arguing with a mountain. The mountain simply did not care about your opinions. They did not attack again that night. Perhaps they were regrouping. Perhaps they were waiting for reinforcements. Either way, the humans and the had a few hours to rest and recover. Grace found Vila in the back of the cave, still watching over the younger children. The small girl had not slept. She had stayed awake all night, singing songs her grandmother had taught her, keeping the little ones calm while the world fell apart around them. "You did well," Grace said, sitting beside her. "I was scared." Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Vila leaned against Grace's arm. "Will the bad soldiers come back?" "Probably." "Will you fight them again?" "If I have to." "I do not want you to fight. I want you to stay with me." Grace put her arm around the child and held her close. "I will always come back to you, Vila. No matter what happens, that is a promise." Outside, the sun was rising over the ruined world. Somewhere in orbit, commanders were planning their next move. And in a small cave on a dead planet, a human doctor and an alien child sat together in the darkness, waiting for whatever came next. They did not wait long. The message came at dawn. Commander of the occupation force spoke directly to the cave through a broadcast signal that could not be blocked. His voice was cold and certain, the voice of someone who had never known doubt. "You have until midday to surrender. Surrender, and I will grant the humans a warrior's death. They will be processed for labor camps. Refuse, and I will collapse the mountain on top of you. There will be no survivors. There will be no rescue. There will only be stone and silence." Daniel listened to the message from the bridge of the Mercy's hand. His ship was damaged, trailing smoke from 3 separate hull breaches. The engines were running hot. The shields were at 40% and falling. They could not take another direct engagement. "How many refugees are in that cave?" he asked. 116, answered, "plus our ground team, plus the prisoner." "How fast can we evacuate?" Ran the numbers. If we land directly at the entrance, if everyone moves at maximum speed, if nothing goes wrong, we might get everyone aboard in 20 minutes. How long until midday? 4 hours. That is not enough time to get in, load everyone, and get out before those patrol ships intercept us. Maya's voice came through the communicator from the ground. Then we do not try to get out. We get in, we load up, and we make them chase us. The ship is faster than their patrol craft in atmosphere. We just need to reach the jump point. The jump point is on the far side of the planet. We would have to fly through their entire defense grid. Yes. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the ruined world below, at the distant shapes of warships waiting in orbit. He thought about everything he had done in his life, all the battles he had fought, all the people he had failed to save. He thought about the ones he had saved too, the ones who had made it because he refused to give up. "Bring everyone to the entrance," he said. "Be ready to move the moment we touch down." Grace received the order and started organizing the evacuation. They were weak and scared, but they listened to her. They had learned to trust her over the past 2 days. They had seen her fight for them, bleed for them, stay awake all night to care for their wounded. She had earned their faith in the hardest way possible. Helped her move the people into groups. The elderly and the very young would board first, then the injured, then everyone else. The process had to be fast and orderly or people would die. "You really think you can do this?" asked. "I think we have to try." That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have. The prisoner watched the preparations from his corner. His wounds had been treated, his hands bound, his weapons taken away. He could not understand what he was seeing. These humans were going to attempt something impossible. They were going to risk their lives for aliens they barely knew. It made no sense. "Why?" he asked when Grace passed near him. "Your ship is damaged. Your crew is exhausted. You could leave right now, escape before Commander attacks. Why stay?" Grace stopped and looked at him. "Would you leave? If these were your people, would you abandon them?" "They are not my people. They are nothing. They are children and parents and grandparents. They are teachers and farmers and artists. They are people with names and memories and dreams. That is not nothing. That is everything." Had no response. The words hit him like physical blows, shaking foundations he had never questioned before. The Mercy's hand descended through the atmosphere at maximum speed. Daniel pushed the engines beyond their recommended limits, ignoring the warning alarms that screamed at him from every console. The ship was not designed for this kind of flying. It was a medical vessel, built for comfort and stability, not combat maneuvers. But it was built by humans, and humans always left room for more than the specifications promised. The ship touched down at the cave entrance with a crash that shook the mountain. The loading ramp dropped before the engines finished cycling down. Maya stood at the bottom, directing traffic, shouting for people to move faster. The streamed aboard, elderly carried by their children, wounded supported by medics, families clutching each other, too afraid to speak, moving on pure instinct toward the safety of the ship. Vila refused to board. She stood at the base of the ramp with her feet planted and her small hands clenched into fists. "Not without Grace," she said. "Grace is coming," told her. "She will be right behind you." She said that before. Adults always say that, then they do not come. Knelt down to her level. "I know you have been hurt, I know people have left you, but Grace is different, she keeps her promises. Please, Vila, get on the ship." "No." Grace appeared at the cave entrance, helping an injured woman walk. She saw Vila and understood immediately. She passed the woman to a medic and ran to the child. "I am here," she said. "I told you I would come back." "You always say that." "And I always do it." Grace picked up the child and carried her up the ramp. "Now we go together, both of us, see." Vila wrapped her arms around Grace's neck and held on tight. She did not speak, but she did not need to. Her grip said everything. The last refugees boarded. Did a head count. 116 plus the human crew plus everyone was accounted for. Go, Maya shouted to Daniel. Go now. The engines roared. The ship lifted off just as the first bombardment struck the mountainside. Rocks exploded. The cave entrance collapsed in a cascade of stone and dust. If they had waited even one more minute, they would all be buried. Daniel pointed the ship toward the sky and pushed the throttle to maximum. The Mercy's hand climbed through the atmosphere, shaking and groaning, held together by willpower as much as engineering. The patrol ships moved to intercept. 3 contacts closing fast, reported. They are hailing us. Commander is demanding our surrender. Daniel did not bother to respond. He adjusted course, diving toward the planet's northern pole where the defense grid was thinnest. The patrol ships followed, firing as they came. Energy bolts struck the shields, draining power with each hit. Shields at 20%, 15, 10. Hold together, Daniel whispered to his ship. Just a little longer. The jump point was ahead, a patch of space where the laws of physics bent just enough to allow faster-than-light travel. If they could reach it, they would be safe. They could not follow them through the jump. But the patrol ships were faster. They were gaining. In seconds, they would be close enough for a killing shot. Then something unexpected happened. One of the patrol ships broke formation. It turned away from the chase and fired on its own wingman. The second patrol ship exploded in a ball of fire. What just happened? Maya demanded. The answer came through the communication system, a voice, young and uncertain. This is Lieutenant of the Fleet. I am defecting. I watched you save my people's enemy. I watched you show mercy to a wounded soldier. I do not understand what you are, but I know what we have become. I will not be part of it anymore. The third patrol ship hesitated, confused by the betrayal. That hesitation was enough. The Mercy's hand reached the jump point and disappeared into the light between stars. Behind them, Lieutenant's ship turned to face his former comrades. He did not expect to survive, but he had made his choice and he would not take it back. Sometimes the smallest acts of mercy created ripples that changed everything. The Mercy's hand emerged from faster-than-light travel in neutral space, far from territory, far from anyone who wanted them dead. The ship was damaged and exhausted, trailing smoke and leaking atmosphere from a dozen small breaches. But it was alive. They were all alive. Grace sat in the medical bay with Vila asleep in her arms. The child had not let go of her since they boarded the ship. Even in sleep, her small fingers clutched Grace's shirt like she was afraid the doctor would disappear if she loosened her grip. Moved through the bay, checking on the refugees. Most of them were sleeping too, worn out by fear and relief and the simple effort of staying alive. A few of the elders sat together in a corner, speaking in low voices, trying to make sense of what had happened to them. Approached Grace quietly. He looked different than he had in the cave. The emptiness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something that might have been wonder. "My people have a saying," he said. "The quality of a stranger is measured not by their words, but by their silence when words would serve them better." Grace looked up at him. "I do not understand." "You could have demanded gratitude. You could have asked for payment, for service, for loyalty. You saved our lives. That is a debt most species would call in. But you said nothing. You asked for nothing. You simply worked. I did not save you for payment." "I know, that is what makes it so remarkable." Sat down beside her, moving slowly like his old bones ached. "When they came, they spoke of protection. They spoke of partnership. Every word was a lie wrapped in pretty language. Your people spoke very little, but every action was true. We just did what anyone would do." Shook his head. "No, that is where you are wrong. Most species would have left us to die. The Galactic Council declared us expendable. They treated us like animals. Only the humans came. Only the humans bled for us." Grace did not know what to say. She looked down at Vila, at the small child who had lost everything and somehow found the strength to trust again. She thought about all the choices that had led to this moment, all the small decisions that had seemed insignificant at the time, but had added up to something that mattered. "We could not walk away," she said finally. "We heard your signal. We knew you were suffering. What kind of people would we be if we ignored that?" "The kind of people most of the galaxy is." "Then maybe the galaxy needs to be better." Daniel appeared in the doorway of the medical bay. He looked tired but steady, the way he always looked after a crisis had passed. "We will reach the sanctuary world in 6 hours. I have already contacted their government. They have agreed to accept the refugees. Housing, food, medical care, everything they need to start over." Stood up slowly. "What about will they come for us there?" "The sanctuary world is protected by treaty. They would have to declare war on half the galaxy to touch you. They will not do that for 100 refugees." "You are certain?" "I am certain." Nodded. He looked at the sleeping around him, at the children and elders and families who had survived against all odds. Then he looked back at Daniel. "My people will remember this. For as long as we exist, we will tell the story of the humans who came when no one else would. We will teach our children that there is still goodness in the universe, even when the darkness seems complete." He turned and walked away before Daniel could respond. Some things did not need a response. Was still in the cargo hold, still under guard, still tied up. Maya had wanted to keep him that way until they reached the sanctuary world. Daniel had agreed, but he also wanted to talk to the young soldier one more time. He found sitting against the wall, staring at nothing. They looked up when Daniel entered but did not speak. "We are going to release you when we reach neutral space," Daniel said. "There is a station about 2 hours from the sanctuary world. We will drop you there. You can find your own way home." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since Grace first saved his life. "Why? I am your enemy. I tried to kill your people. Why would you let me go?" Daniel sat down across from him. "Because you are not my enemy. You are a soldier who followed orders. The orders were wrong, but that does not make you evil. It just makes you someone who made a mistake. And if I go back, if I tell my commanders everything I learned about your ship, your people, your weaknesses, then you tell them. We will deal with that when it happens. You are not afraid." "I am always afraid. But I learned a long time ago that fear is a bad reason to do the wrong thing." Looked at him with eyes that held something new. Not understanding, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. The first crack in a lifetime of certainty. "My people believe that mercy is weakness," he said. "They teach us that compassion leads to defeat. But you showed mercy to me, to everyone, and you still won. How is that possible?" Daniel smiled slightly. "Maybe your people are wrong. Maybe mercy is not weakness. Maybe it is the thing that makes victory worth having." He left alone to think about that. Some lessons could not be taught. They could only be learned slowly over time through experience and reflection. The Mercy's hand landed on the sanctuary world just as the sun was setting. The sky was purple and gold, and the air smelled like flowers and rain. It was the most beautiful thing the refugees had seen in months. They filed off the ship in small groups, supported by medical staff from the sanctuary world who were waiting to receive them. Social workers, counselors, doctors, an entire system of care that had been prepared in advance because someone had called ahead and asked for help. Vila stood at the viewport, watching the sunset. Grace stood beside her, one hand resting gently on the child's shoulder. "Will you stay?" Vila asked. "I cannot. My ship needs repairs. My crew needs rest. And there are other people out there who need help too." "Will you come back?" Grace knelt down so she could look Vila in the eyes. "I do not know when, I do not know how, but yes, I will come back, I promise." Humans keep their promises. This human does." Vila reached out and hugged her. It was a fierce hug, the kind that said everything words could not express. Grace held her tight and did not let go until the child was ready. When they finally separated, Vila looked up at her with eyes that were clearer than they had been 3 days ago. The emptiness was fading. Something else was growing in its place. Something that looked like hope. "Your tools were kinder," Vila said softly. "You came with medicine instead of weapons. You came with bandages instead of chains. That is what I will remember. That is what I will tell my children someday when I am old and they ask me why humans are different from everyone else." Grace smiled. Her eyes were wet, but she did not wipe them away. "Take care of yourself, Vila. Grow up strong. Be kind to others the way we tried to be kind to you. That is the only payment I will ever ask for." The child nodded solemnly. Then she turned and walked down the ramp toward her new life, toward a future that had seemed impossible only days before. The Mercy's hand lifted off an hour later, rising through the atmosphere toward the stars. Daniel set course for the nearest repair station, started compiling medical reports. Maya ran diagnostics on the damaged defense systems. Grace stood alone at a viewport, watching the sanctuary world grow smaller beneath them. She thought about Vila. She thought about and Lieutenant and all the others whose lives had been changed by 3 days of impossible choices. She thought about the question the child had asked when they first met. Will your tools be kinder than their swords? The answer was yes. The answer would always be yes. Not because humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced than anyone else, but because they chose to be kinder. They chose to help when helping was hard. They chose to heal when destroying would have been easier. That was what humans did. That was who humans were. And somewhere in the galaxy, the story was already spreading. The story of the ship that came when no one else would. The story of the doctors who fought with medicine. The story of the soldiers who showed mercy to their enemies. The story of the tools that were kinder than swords.